So we're
Hello,
here.
peeps.
I screwed up my name already.
Rehearsal, rehearsal for tomorrow Dag van de Dans.
Yes, please come.
Chat. Best practices in contemporary dance in Dag van de Dans in Brussels at Class Studio. Now we're gonna be at Class Studio.
It's the first time presenting in Brussels, right?
Or
did you have anything before?
I present, yeah, if I
like
count my school, school I presented.
True.
So I presented within my studies on multimedia and communication technology, from which I just finished with my internship at Motion Bank, from which I just sent finally an email that it took me like 2 days to write. Oh my God, it took me so long to write. Just to write this, like I love, like, you know, I like this collaboration because it's so difficult for me just to say like, hello, how are you? Can you check this? Thank you. You know, basically this is what I was saying in different words. Anyway, and so I think Naoto is very good in doing this practical writing. Yeah. Oh my God, Jack. Jack, oh my God. Okay, let's go practical. But Jack, if you're seeing this, I hope it's just this thing with the emails, but just so short version of this thing is that we are presenting this that we're going to present tomorrow at the Dag van de Dans in PAF, Performing Art Forum, within the framework of PAF Summer University. And then we propose a text, and then they come back to us like, would you mind to send a 300 words version of this text? And then program. So yeah, the program. So Naoto took care of this and he just sent it back, and then he just replied with this like, a PS, by the way, if you want you can use more than 300 words. Seriously.
Well, now you should send your thesis.
And you know, without anything, without a hello or anything, just like copy paste, like, and I say like just more than 300 words PDF. You know, actually I think it would be just even funny. And then they decide what to do with that. I think we will be fine in whatever they decide from within that.
Yeah,
that could be interesting. Anyway, so let's not try to deviate from here. So we are here rehearsing, right?
Do we have a theme to talk about?
Or not, I don't know. Like I said, I proposed to Naoto, like, let's try to talk around some topics. So one of the topics that I propose, also because we're just opening this exposition with seats, is arts and science. That's one topic. Maybe other topic, I guess, could be we talk about practices. What is this that we do? And I think from there we can just go on.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So what is this now?
The practices. So
what is best practices in contemporary dance?
It's funny that every time we talk about this title, like everyone's like, you know, like confused, especially dance people. But actually, it's only dance people, I think. I never like had this kind of, you know, like confrontation with other people from other fields. But like dance people, they're like...
the impulse dance was the top of
that's
that.
Class, exactly.
Yeah, Class, I remember, like, what do you mean? But Class was nice because I remember he said to us, like, it's so good that you use the hashtag. Without the hashtag, it will be... So since then, so I always like, I have this on mind, you know, the hashtag. And because now it's slowly, like at the beginning, I try to put it just everything in lowercase as a long thing, as a teaser to force people to look at that. But then after, so now I'm more like putting like the capital best practices in contemporary dance, right? Within a long sentence. But then also I always, I think I put, of course, the hashtag, since Class said that, I am very conscious of that. So for instance, in the application that we passed for the VJ contest for this thing in Rome, there was no possibility of that because of the format of the field, the HTML field. I couldn't put the hashtag because it was not valid. So then I thought, then I was feeling already like, oh no, oh no, no, no. This is too strong.
Wow, that's funny. They don't allow it.
Yeah. Don't know why. Anyway, so how would you define
Practice.
uh yeah,
I mean, I think I'm better at like maybe speaking about the history of the best practices, let's say,
yeah.
because it's like we started like meeting online like 2 years
Okay,
ago
so wait.
almost.
Okay,
Yeah,
so maybe I will say like, so best practices is a queer form of conversation between technology and bodies.
yeah.
And then I think now to I think you just maybe do a summarize how
Summary,
this happened. Where
how
are
this
we?
happened. So everyone knows that 2 years ago we had beginning of the pandemic, and I proposed to meet online, like have a online meetup just to talk about what was it? Dance and technology. I think that's kind of the thing I
No. It wasn't.
framed.
No, you put it as a digital performance. I think
Could be
it was
more
not that.
specific.
It was online performances. That's the way
Ah,
we
okay.
frame it. Online performances.
That's funny because then I had already in mind that I wanted to do something specific with online performances. Anyways, because that's something I thought, we have to talk about it. It's not like, we can just come up with something and we just produce something, but we need to start conversation, open up the conversation first, which is kind of the how we started this chat. So that we have this practice, like two pillars. One is the practice that we do as a practice, but not a performance. And the other
Yeah.
thing is the chat, which is what we're having right now. And we kind of started with the chat, like we met like every week or so, and the weekend
Was every week at the
online.
beginning was every week.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then after 3 months, I think, April, May, June, on July 8th, if I remember correctly, 2020, right? Yeah, 2020. We had this first
2020.
practice that basically like we started to talk about
It was
like
before PUF. It was after PUF.
um that's a good question. Actually, I don't
No, I think we
remember.
start before. I think we start
Could be.
before, but I think that the difference is like at the beginning. So we start in between, like we try to practice. I mean, it was not called a practice. We just start like within your framework, and that it was proposed. I mean, I read it through the choreographic coding lab. There is this framework proposed by Motion Bank on dance and technology. Um, and then in the Facebook there was an event so that you share on these online performances, and then so I joined, and then weekly, then so at the beginning it was open, right? And it was not called anything. It was just your call out to let's meet up every Saturday. It was during the pandemic, and it's performed online basically. And then during that period I think it was a meeting of 2 hours. Then basically I think we share tools, and I think you share a lot of your tools that already you were working with,
Right.
uh,
Like with
and
OBS Studio or like these
different things,
tools.
like
Yeah.
like a lot of different things that already you were working with. And so then at some point afterwards, after doing this, there was in between performing, talking a lot about hardware, criticizing the the field, talking a lot about motion bank. uh, at some point we thought like and in between them performing somehow everything was happening at the same time. So
Right.
at some point we thought like, wait, and it was open, no? We have a ghost guest and things like that, right?
Yeah, we announced it on kind of public group on Facebook. So sometimes we have a guest. We just it's like really random, and sometimes Jorge was not there, and I was talking with someone else. But then at one point we decided to do more like a focused session between two of us.
And at some point, then so I think so. Then we start just practicing, and then we didn't know. We didn't call that. It was called nothing. I mean, we didn't call it
No,
anything.
it's we call it best practices in
Yeah,
contemporary dance from the beginning.
from the really okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I remember, so like in one hand, this comes from at that time I was studying, doing the last subject of development in my school, and I was studying, and I was studying for an exam about best practices in coding. So that you have different types of code, the way structures of code that you apply depending of the problem that you have to solve, um, and those are called best practices. um, and then so then we just were talking, because the conversation was in Triangle, how funny it will be to talk about best practices in
Yeah.
contemporary dance.
Yeah, because if you look at
How
like software development or like even like business management and stuff, you can always find, you know, like 10 best practices in blah blah. And you know, have this web page talk about this. But you never find best practices in contemporary dance. I mean, maybe some kind of dance, yes, but contemporary dance, what we're talking about is really different from like having this kind of best practices.
But I think it's interesting because always when people ask about this name, so I know this take because it was proposed like somehow as a joke, I think from me. But then at some point, then like there is a text that you wrote about this. I don't know exactly where is it right now online, but I think maybe it would be interesting to find it and to share this, because you summarize this, that it doesn't, not only, I mean, it reflects about the best practices. Yeah, there is a text about this. I don't know if you can find it.
Maybe like something like to find like to search for best practices is kind of best practices for us. So it's not like that where we reach to the best practices, but
The best
we
practices
kind of theorize and try to find the best practices is
through
actually the best
practicing.
practice. Yeah.
Yeah. So like the best practice is like practicing, basically.
Exactly.
Practicing.
Kind of
Yeah.
self-referential or like recursive definition.
But I will find this text today. Like, where is it? Because we are using this in the application that we are using these days. So, but anyway, yeah. So we started like this, and then what we do in a practice then?
Yeah. So
What do we do in a practice?
it's like just like a Zoom call, but we use this tool called LiveLab,
Yeah.
which fortunately became public around the time we started the practice. And
because at the beginning we were not using that.
no, we were on Jitsi.
At some point appeared, and then we say,
Yeah.
oh, okay, let's just do this, and then yeah.
Yeah, it's just another video call, but what's good about it is you can share as many like cameras, windows, like desktop windows, like screen share as much as you want. So like if it's just two of us, but like we end up with like a grid of different angles of cameras and screens and stuff. And also you can make it pop out as another window, so it's easy to load it to other
in other softwares.
another software. Yeah.
Yeah, and manipulate the image.
Yeah. And share it back again.
Yeah. So what we're doing, I think, like the beginning was straightforward, just like basically, I create a composition with PDMX with PDMX, a VJ software, and then Hydra. I compose something using a green key, and then I send that composition to Naoto. Naoto will use his tools, and then he will recompose that image using my fit image, and he will send back this image to me, and then we will repeat the process over and over. And at some point, then the bodies will get intertangled, and I just add the configuration of the body,
and there's
and a
always
glitch. Delay, the glitch is there all the time.
But that's like at first it was more like a experiment. We set that's like what we set was like the starting time, and then we finish after 1 hour. So we
We said
start at 8 p.m. and then we finish at 9 p.m. and there's no extension. We just
no, and it's
cut
true
the connection.
because at some point also we were discussing, so we were not. I think that became more clear afterwards, but at the beginning we were not like proposing subjects or something to work on it more than just like we're gonna practice for 1 hour, starting at this point and finishing at this point. At some point, naturally happened that we knew that one thing that we knew is right before the end of the practice, then we're just gonna dance, like we're gonna just like really go for dancing.
Yeah.
But beforehand, we didn't predefine which tools to use, the content, or so on. And I think at some point afterwards, I think that was more in their hybrid residence that we did at PAF while I was working on my thesis, that we tried to work on some topics. I think maybe 1 or 2 times.
Right. That was in around February of 2021.
2021, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we tried this within this format of developing. We have the developing, practice, and chat then.
Yeah. So like a 1-day kind of virtual residency format. In the morning, we check in, develop something. And then afterwards, we have like 2 hours, right? In that time. Of,
and then sometimes we change
practice.
it, like sometimes we say 1 hour, 2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. And then after that, we had the chat in the end.
Yeah, but then we try like sometimes like let's do it right after, but since we said like let's do it as a durational performance, so it was non-stop streaming for 6 hours, 7 hours. So then when we finish, it sometimes was really heavy, and then I think we then said like, okay, let's just chat afterwards because it was very heavy.
And we had like a few times guests at the chat to have like different inputs from people.
Right. And I think something that I think I recall that is interesting to mention here for people to know in this process is like, so we start as just practicing, and at some point, Jan, how is her name? Last name? Jan.
Jan Vogt from
Node. She invite Naoto to co-create, to organize these online platform using Mozilla Hubs, where Naoto proposed the choreographic coding lab online version. And then he created a program, and then within that program, then we said, okay, let's do a practice. And then actually it was the first time then we met in person after a few months of being working
like half a year almost. Yeah, because that was in end of September 2020. So we were sharing the apartment, and we spent like a week. But the climax was this practice together in the same place. That we had this green screen, like a panel, and on
between the two of us.
On two sides, we were having laptops so that we share the same space, but we don't see each other. And we try to frame it as a kind of performance in a way.
Then we didn't knew like what was the intention with it, and then
we had even like a stage design.
Yes, we were stage design, and then basically we were aiming to propose something good. We were working, and we have this pressure of presenting at Node, which is an important festival of media art and arts in Germany. So we thought like, okay, it has to be something good, right? And then even we rehearsed, and then the rehearsal was quite good, right? I mean, I felt the rehearsal, I know aesthetically or functional was good. But then when we performed, I remember things were not working. And right after we finished, we felt like, oh my God. Like somebody asked us like when we went downstairs, how did it went? And then we were like, we totally failed.
Yeah.
Right? And that thing was what it changed everything. Because from that moment, so it was at the beginning, like, you know, we were feeling like as a down feeling of, we failed. But after just a few minutes after, just reflecting, is like, wait a moment. So we totally fail. All right, so we don't have to actually aim for doing something good. Let's just practicing, because this is totally it just bypasses completely the idea that we have to perform and doing something good. And then from there, that we knew that, because actually, so I think what we were trying to do to in Node is to perform. Yeah, I think we were trying to create a performance, a good performance, online performance. We failed. Since we failed, then we thought like, okay, we don't have to work towards a performance. We just have to keep on practicing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like well, yeah, like I think it could be a performance, but we have to do a performance within the frame of practice. So we, after that, it's not that we stopped kind of performing, but we had some like a path you were doing, were there in February and March, I think. You also like shared it at path, and also at Impulstance last summer we did the, I don't know how we framed it, hybrid performance, was it?
No. So that was also, I think what is interesting from this framework is like, because we bypass the politics of doing or by this failure in Node. So then what it happens is like, we got this invitation to perform, not to perform, basically to share the framework at the Impulse Dance. So what we thought is like the easiest way to talk about this that is so intertangled that, and so that at the core is just a language that Naoto and myself we just developed by practicing a lot. Then we thought the easiest way is just like, okay, what we're gonna do is just like practice, basically practice with audience in the same space. It was the first time. And then because we did that in that way, so we proposed we're gonna practice, but we have an audience. And then we said like, after we practice, we can do a small chat with audience where we would like to hear questions and options, right? And then after we finish that, so it happens in a similar way with Node. That is, after we finish, we thought, wait a second, what we just did right now, it was a performance, with audience. It was a hybrid thing because also it was online. So we thought this is actually is the starting point from what we call a hybrid performance now.
Yeah, I see. And that was something we tried at Puff when we both were there in September, I think.
September, yeah, 2021, yeah. And I think that's, in short, is the history of the practices. In between, like, I mean, there are so many things now, like there's so many different frameworks. So after, also we were invited to speak in a conference, I guess, of like New Now. We were invited as speakers where we proposed the chat. So in this case, we didn't propose the practice format, but we proposed the chat format of the best practices.
But on the stage.
On the stage. So like in a classical conference where before of us were people like using the slides and, and after us also, while what we propose, and I remember we discussed how to approach that with Naoto. We said like, okay, I remember saying to Naoto, I don't want to have to prove my presence here by starting who I am, showing my credentials basically, and showing who are us, like, yeah, through these credentials. But then rather than that, we thought it might be interesting just actually to take the chat in that format of a conference as a performative moment where we just share the fragility and vulnerability of not knowing actually on stage with people.
Right. Yeah, that was like something, I don't know if that was at New Now, but I started to like think more about like vulnerability basically when I present something.
Yeah.
That
yeah.
yeah, and that also connects for me to about this kind of idea of safe space, that, you know, I'm sharing something that might make myself vulnerable, but that's, yeah, that's what it is. That's the sharing process.
Right. So here we are testing our installation. There's going to be tomorrow shared the DAFA the dance, the class and collabs, reach and collabs studio in Ouderhem in Brussels. It's an ongoing installation of basically a playlist randomed of our practices that at the moment is around 200 hours of content.
Just with the
Imagine
practices.
that. Yeah. And actually, so imagine, so it's like 200 hours of content. And you know what? I don't know if you realize, but we are in the practice 99. So we haven't
really?
reached the 100. Yes. So we have to do something special for the practice 100.
That's 99 videos.
99 videos on the playlist of the practice. Yeah.
I see. Because we have like usually 2 videos for one practice.
Yeah.
That's something to celebrate.
Yeah. We are about to go to the number 100 of practice. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool.
So maybe we can just like jump into other topic. I don't know. Like,
so we jump to
art. Start to feel like really, yeah. I mean, we can continue with the, you know, what this practice is, but it also feels like starting to get like kind of bored. Not bored, but it's different flow from usual chat.
Chat, right? Like, yeah, because so what we were trying to do here in somehow is like give ground for those who have no idea of the framework to, in a way, have a basic reference of timeline of from where this comes from, and in a nutshell, what is this? So I guess in a nutshell, this is about net art, live coding, contemporary dance, hybrid formats. And actually, I guess in a more philosophical way, like emergence and basically, practicing resilience, practicing vulnerability, and not knowing. Practicing to be okay with not knowing.
Yeah, it's very like, on one hand, it's so kind of conceptual, but also like it comes from the by doing, really hands-on. So that's why I have tons of videos. But that's, again, it's not like about producing a performance, but it can happen to be a performance, but it's a, by definition, it's a practice.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about art and science.
So how
art
does
and
it
science.
Where is the science part now?
Yeah, I guess like in our case, straightforward is computer science, and I think like more in complexity science in a nutshell. Complexity science and emergence. This is a topic that for me is new, so I'm starting getting also more involved in understanding what does this mean actually. So I wouldn't speak too much about it more than what I have found so far. But like going back more to art and science, because I guess like in the way how I see it, like this that we do within these terminologies like dance and technology, art and technology, and then art and science, in that order of umbrella, opening the scope. So yesterday, so I'm part of a collective called SEEDS, which stands for Space Ecologies, Art and Design. And yesterday we have the opening of an expo from which we present our first artwork that went into the space, called Engines of Eternity. And it was done in Pilar, not far away from where I live. And it was very interesting also to see how the event was first organized, like curated, and also to see how it was the response of the people, because so it was an event where I think together with Seeds are like 5 artists are invited. Were invited by Karin something, I don't remember her last name. She's a professor of biological evolution and Kaya Leuven, and she was the entry point, and she was the person who invites Seeds to participate on this project, from which rotifers, which are small tiny animals, female animals, which are a sensation and are shocking in the sense that they are females that clone itself. So meaning that they don't need males to reproduce. And so they are super resilient in the way that they can resist incredible temperatures and ionic exposure and radiation and so on. So they are these like very special creatures that don't need males to reproduce. So the experiment of her was to basically send these rotifers to space, and then do some biological experiments in the space, and then bringing them back, and then comparing those rotifers who went to space with those who stays in Earth, and then do some thing. Then the work of Seeds was to do some generative artwork within this framework. So what I think I'm bringing this topic here is not too much about what is this project about it, but it's like to think about how fragile and how complex is this topic of trying to merge art and science, because it's not an easy match. As I put it in my context, and the one that I have experience on and I have been researching for 5 years now, is on design and art. That's my context, the one that I know the best, and I know it's a very difficult topic to put together. So going back to art and science, I think is quite difficult in one hand, because naturalists in science, which are very based on facts and proofs, it's very hard for them to understand why, how the art can influence, and how the art works within this context, basically. People who are trained as a naturalist scientist. And on the other hand, like, you have this expo, for instance, where I think the umbrella was like to present a work that it was aimed for general public, right? So in a way, I guess, was through art exposing science in a familiar way, in way how families
to communicate what science is, what they are working on.
Yeah, like through, I think, yes, as an art, as a medium, how science science and art can be a match, basically. And so it was like the way how the curatorial process happened, I think it was like that. So the selected artworks, I think they try to reflect that. But then in reality, what it happens is that I have this conversation with different people, is like, it's so scattered the way how they decide to put the program. So you enter, and then you have a forest of installations, crazy artifacts made by an artist that I don't remember his name, but his main goal is, like, during the process where the installation is going to happen, families are invited, and public in general, to basically come together with the artist together, and then just start creating and affecting these artifacts and creating art pieces together. So there is colors, there is different material that kids and families can use together, and then create things, and then put it together as in the way to creating art installations. But then when you go upstairs, the second floor, then one of the one of the works that is exposed, and maybe I might dare to say it was the highlight of the expo, is the project of seats, which is actually the only project, if I'm not wrong, if I'm not mistaken, it was the only of the artists that actually uses consciously it sent something to the space, and then once it came back, basically Angelo sent his fingerprints on some bags where the rotifers were. So Angelo sent his fingerprint to space, and then when those fingerprints came back together with the data, the print is transposed into a 2D image, and then using this data to, through a generative process, create an art piece that became a 3D sculpture and also some prints. So I think what I'm trying to say here is that CETA, I think this is a great work in terms of bioinformatics, so which is very close to science in the way how all this complex information was placed. And so in terms of graphic design and information design was very well done. So then you see this, that is quite complex. It's a very complex thing with nice imaginary, with code and things like that. And then you have next to it three pieces that it can be completely appreciated as an apart thing. What I think they were just like, in a classical sense, like some three abstract paintings. They were just actually the fingerprints of Angelo. So what it actually originates the whole expo. So they were just like a big print on metal, the 3X putting next to each other, which I think that summarized the whole project for me. Like the rest of thing, and I think it's here what I'm struggling trying to share is like, there's a big difference between these three art pieces that they summarize everything. And also they're very performative in terms of like these three things. They are wonderful also as classical art. They are just so well done and they're so abstract. And also they have so much history, stories behind the way how they were conceived, and everything is just as by chance as or framework. So it just really represents for me something that is artistically cohesive and interesting, because also you don't need to know all the nitty things about science and all these complex things that in the other place, the one with bioinformatics, the prints, the data visualizations, the 3D prints, and the other one is very difficult for people to understand what actually does it mean, these graphics. Yep. So I think it's quite a drastic separation between these simple abstractions and this approach to generative art.
Mm. Yeah, that's something like I also kind of being more conscious about when I, let's say, produce something. It's not just like the concept behind it, but of course it has to look interesting. Like it's always like good if it has some kind of this catchiness into the artwork, that even if people don't understand what's behind it, if they can, you know, if they think it's pretty or like even like ugly, that already is like something good. If it's something that is uninteresting, as like visually uninteresting, then you lose a lot of potential funders or well, audience, right? So that's really like a more strategy, or maybe like a design process. But
Right.
that's something I really, yeah, what I hear from the Seeds work, I think it's really smart.
Yeah, but it's like it's so we have this friend of ours, like Uli. She was one of the persons who was part of this chat, right? She's an astrophysicist, and she's very interested in doing a scientific approach. So doing a research actually that is funded by from a scientific point of view of actually measuring and trying to prove, trying to see if actually the artistic thinking can bring something into science. And she struggles a lot with this because so yeah, she's in the business of basically proving things, right? While I don't know how we will call what are the business that we are. If Uli is in the business of proving things, how would you frame that will be our business?
Yeah, I mean, before going that, like, I always feel like why always art and science is like kind of bad marriage is because like in short, it's not always true, but like you said, science is about like starting the question or hypothesis, and then you have to find the like why it happens, like a theory or result, whatever that you, it's more like narrowing down from the question. But art
Right.
is always the other way around, that you start with something even like so trivial, but you end up with 100 questions with it about it.
Right. So like, yeah, straightforward, like the naturalistic approach in science is reductionism. As you said, you know, you start for something and then you go close, you narrow down. When you do your PhDs are really narrow into one question and you try to use your methodology in order to prove if that was wrong or right, or where this goes after. While in art, I will agree, yes, like you will be more just you I think you're not trying to prove something. Like in that sense, I think that's close this, but I think that's maybe that's interesting because I think art and science are in different in the different domains, as we said, and I think maybe the place the place in between that has if there is being discussed nowadays with technology is engineering. I think engineering is in somehow the cross point where these two, in a way, I think they can do something because of the pragmatic also approach, which is very convenient for science.
Yeah, it could be because engineering is not about like finding why something happens, but it's just about making stuff happen. Like if if this room is too hot, then it doesn't matter like what's emitting the heat or what's, I mean, maybe you want to know about the insulation and stuff, but in the end, you need to have a system that cools down. And if it works, then you don't have to know why it works.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just saying
And
because
then
this room is getting hot.
and then going back to this question that I was saying, like if the business of science is about like proving things, then I think I like to think personally also, and I think this is the way how I see this framework, best practices with Naoto is is not concerning about creating something, but rather about creating the conditions for something to happen. And in that sense, I think I refer to what you're saying with engineering. I found that's interesting because it's not totally that, but it somehow it is within also it is part of that domain.
Because we didn't like start with all these questions. Like when we started like practicing, like we have all these kind of questions we came up with, like this self-dissociation or this sandbox. But then that's not something we asked, like that's not the reason why we started the practice. We just started as like for fun, for example. It's
Yeah.
not like, it was more like a curiosity, but then it was not about how would the net performance influence ourselves. But then it came naturally to us after doing it for a few months.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Like we never really start like thinking, okay, let's investigate what is net art, and then after let's go and practice.
Yeah, we didn't even think about net art until like at some point we started talking about it. Because,
I think we start really talking about concepts when I was writing my thesis, because then I have to write basically, and that was a good excuse to really go into concepts because it was and I think that's interesting. I really appreciate that I went through that path of design, because it forces me to putting down into all these concepts that I understand and that we understand and that we build through the chat, and then narrowing all these things down in a communicable manner. So softening the discourse into something that will be more accessible for other people, and trying as much as possible, if not impossible, to make it less self-referential.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, true. And it's, yeah, as you said, it's about communication, because it's like we know that what we're doing is valid and it's something new, but we can't just say it's something new. I mean, we say that, but also like we have to refer to what is happening, what people are doing, even though even though we're not, directly like referencing them or like taking
Right.
inspiration. Like for example, Namjoon Paik, like we talked about it, but it's not that we're trying to, make something like what he does. Or I mean, at some point we maybe did it a bit more explicitly, but it's yeah, it's not like we're kind of branching out from something else, but it's just like started something new, and then we have to see the correlation to what has been happening or what others are doing.
Yeah, and I think that's at the core of what we're trying to do actually here. I mean, in sense of like creating community, and that is kind of like I like to think of this. So we submit this application for Burj like to develop this one, like to develop the hybrid performance. But a second, I think this is more key, and I think this is very interesting, like how at the big, I mean, like the from 2020 until 2022, we basically have developed a framework where Naoto and myself can trying to find ourselves within that, and then we just share it online as to try to incentivize or to motivate discussion about these topics. Um, but then we're thinking then from 2022 moving forward, if we have some funding, will be interesting to actually trying to work towards some. I don't like to even work I don't even like completely the word community, but in order to make this simple, I think I will use it here as in order to in order to so that we would like to build somehow a community, so not a sect of best practitioners, but more like a space where people can basically can express themselves within this within dance and technology, I think.
Right. Yeah, it's something. Yeah, I don't know what's the right word besides community, because it's something that is more like community feels like something not exclusive, but you have, explicitly like you're the community member and you're not.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah,
more
yeah.
like
I think
something that people can come and
yeah, because
go.
I think yeah, I think in that regard, like I was having this conversation with Luli again, and that's one of the topics that I argue in my paper is that there is the communities are these great frameworks where people have conditions, and like because then sometimes they're supported, so there are places where conditions are there, uh, but at the same time communities are ready also to be one-sided, in the sense of like if you are part of the hip-hop community, you should in a way like feel yourself in terms of identity, in terms of individualism, you should be aligned within more or less concrete sort of values, I guess, and political views and one so on, which I think I don't see it so practical when you want to try to develop your individuality as an artist. So I mean that specifically is with community. Like for instance, like with Seeds, we have this conversation, like because we are trying to redefine our mission and vision. So and then we go into these topics and trying to write together. Then okay, is this so? for them it's about community, but then I just start bringing this again, that perhaps that I just don't like the word community because imply that you have to, in a way, be pro gay rights or LGBT community rights, or not part of this community. So it demands for you to take a position, right, basically. And I'd rather, so I think that a good analogy, and this comes from, I think it's Martin at some point, Martin Spamberg said this at some point, that he puts the analogy of, he put the verses between meetings and gatherings. So like these meetings are close to this idea of community, which has conditions, and you know that happens every certain time. You know the space, you know the regular suspects and so on. But
gathering.
on the other hand, you have gatherings, which gatherings are just spontaneously, and they just happen at some point, and they just dissolve at some point.
Yeah,
as
like
it happens
come to my home and have beer.
Oh, as it happens also with happens also with rave parties, you know, like these illegal rave parties. They just, all of them just all of a sudden is like, do you have some projector? Do you have some sound system? Send it in the network. In less than 6 hours, everybody just partying full on. After 12 hours, during that period, you make great connections. You feel life of the fullest. After 12 hours, everybody's going back home. There is no strings attached. There is no compromise for this to happen in 8 days. Maybe it will happen, but maybe it will not. There is not a compromise to meet again.
With the same people.
And with the same people, exactly. So it doesn't demand for you as a member. I mean, because this idea of member, it doesn't exist in there, right? You are not a member of a gathering.
Right.
You are more a participant, I guess.
Yeah. I would say like, maybe we cut here and tomorrow we can talk about the community, because it's an interesting topic. Like not just like what community is, what we're talking about right now, but like,
interesting.
Yeah, how do we, connect to the people, basically?
Yeah, that would be interesting, because then we will have people and I would like to know how people will feel about it actually. How does that work? And actually this will be perfect in this idea, because with class we start thinking, and we create this Facebook group of Dance and Tech Belgium, which has currently 7 participants.
Oh yeah.
So if you are in Belgium, or if maybe it doesn't matter if you're not in Belgium, but you want to be part of Dance and Tech Belgium, join. And so I guess the link will be somewhere. And then so there will be interesting then to talk about this idea of like community. What does this mean actually?
Yeah,
great. So thank you so much.
Good idea that if I have a screen that shows the playlist as well. I mean, I don't know how your setup will be, but at least for me, I think it's good. Then I don't have to show the show reel and stuff.
Yeah. Like I mean, it will be just, I mean, I'm going today to see how I set up the installation, but it will be just somewhere projecting this that we see here somewhere. So we'll see. So I guess hopefully also maybe we have to manage, because of the cable, it seems that is now so long, all these things that we don't have to discuss here. So maybe we can just close the chat here, and then we go to backstage, and then we talk about this technical nightmares that we experience.
Whatever. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for watching.
Right.
Please subscribe. It reached 500 subscribers, and I'm really happy.
Oh wow. Yes. All right.
Thanks. Ciao.